I was Aiyuk with Rico from RicoScores, and we have a few wide receiver rumors for the Washington Commanders. We have three main topics that we're going to talk about and break down. First of all, should the Washington Commanders go sign all-pro wide receiver Michael Thomas? That was brought up by an expert outside of the Commanders fan base. So this is a guy that has nothing to do with the Commanders bringing this up and saying that that should be something that should happen. We're going to dive into why we should and, of course, why we should not. Also, the Draft Network, another group of experts that have no attachment to the Commanders whatsoever, listed the best undrafted free agent for each NFL team. You'll probably be surprised who the Washington Commander one is, but of course, I love it. I'm excited. If you know me, you know why. You should already know who the player is off rip. Also, Brandon Aiyuk's price tag just went up. We're going to dive into how that happened and how that potentially affects the Commanders' chances of getting them next offseason in 2025. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned because I'm keeping y'all updated on any rumors going on. Whenever we have any access to OTAs practices, I'm gonna have those clips and breakdowns for you as well for every player and position group that I can get my hands on. Working on film sessions for the rookie class, and I have a whole lot of fun ideas for this entire team. Even though it's kind of like a dead period for the Commanders, it's never a dead period for RicoScores. So make sure y'all stay tuned. Make sure you pull up every day for at least one video a day. And without further ado, man, let's go ahead and get to this, man. Instead of wasting more of y'all time, let's get it. Adam. All right, so first of all, Matt Holder of Bleacher Report, again, no attachment or relation to the Washington Commanders in any way, shape, or form. He did an article that says the one move every NFL team still needs to make in the 2024 offseason before we get to the regular season. And he breaks it down by each division and things like that. I'm seeing a few players that I'm like, maybe the Commanders should even go get them. But as far as the Commanders go specifically, he said the Washington Commanders should sign wide receiver Michael Thomas Jr. They go on to say surrounding Jaden Daniels with as much support as possible should be the Commanders' top priority. Right now, third-round pick Luke McCaffrey is currently projected to be the offense's starting slot receiver, and McCaffrey was a reach according to Bleacher Report's scouting department. I don't think he was a reach at all, but you know, go ahead and cook up Bleacher Report. We'll let you live. We'll allow it for now for the purpose of this article. Ranking 290th on their final big board. Oh yeah, no, that's completely disrespectful to Luke McCaffrey, but he'll go out there and prove everybody wrong. So I mean, there's no need to even defend him right now. When we get to this regular season, Bleacher Report will see. Continuing with the article, while Thomas is well past his prime, it would be in Daniels' and Washington's best interest to add the veteran wideout and kick the tires on him to see what he has left in the tank. And now, of course, the first thing when you think of Michael Thomas, you think of his injury history, man. Going all the way back to March 15th of 2015, he dealt with a nagging groin injury through the January playoffs and then had sports hernia surgery, and he was ready to start for the 2015 season. Then December 4th, 2016, Thomas missed week 14 with an unspecified foot injury and that he suffered sometime in week 13, even though he played the whole game. Then September 13th, 2020, Thomas suffered a high ankle sprain during week 1's win over the Buccaneers. He missed a couple of weeks due to this injury. Then October 21st, 2020, Thomas sustained a hamstring injury in practice ahead of week 7, and he missed 2 games because of this injury. Then December 16th, 2020, Thomas missed the final 3 games of the regular season because of his lingering ankle injury that he'd been dealing with several games before. He didn't play in the 2021 season at all after a setback in his rehab. Then August 21st, 2022, he has suffered some sort of like a thigh hamstring sprain / pull type of thing, but he was ready to go by week 1 of that season. Then September 25th, 2022, he went down in week 3 with a pedal toe dislocation, and he was placed on IR ahead of week 9. And then November 12th, 2023, last season, he suffered a knee injury on the Saints' first drive of the week 10 matchup versus the Vikings, and it ended up being a knee MCL sprain, a grade 2. This guy's a very rich injury history, but if you go back, I mean, before 2019, he played in almost every game available. Like, he only missed like 3-4 games his entire career up to that point. But then 2020, he only played in 7 games, started 5 technically, and then 2021 he missed the entire season. Then 2022 he only played in 3 games, and then 2023 he played in 10 but only started 7, and then again he suffered that injury towards the end of the season as well. But when we're talking about a guy that when he is healthy, he has been one of the top receivers in the NFL. I mean, we can start with Pro Football Focus grades, and then we'll get to his accolades, and then we'll do an official breakdown of Michael Thomas and his short burst onto the scene. I mean, he was going crazy, but it wasn't very long-lived, because he was drafted in 2016. He had an 86.4 Pro Football Focus grade then. Then 2017, when he officially burst into the scene, he had a 90.5 Pro Football Focus overall grade. Then 2018 he had a 91.3, 2019 he had a 90.4, then 2020 he had a 85.2, and then of course you have to skip the 2021 season because he never played in that one. 2022 he had a 77.3, and then last year he had a 67.4, which is not bad at all. That really isn't terrible. It's not as bad as I thought it would have been. Now, granted, I haven't gone back to watch any tape on Michael Thomas's 2023 season yet, so I'm just going to kind of take their word for it for now. But even most recently, last year, week 13 against the Falcons, he had an 89.9 grade. They felt like week 1 he was bad, week 10 he was bad, but every other game, week 9 against Tampa Bay, 74.4 grade. Week 11 versus Atlanta, 84. At Denver, week 12, 76. And week 14 versus Philadelphia, 80. And then again, week 13 at Atlanta, he had an 89.9 grade. And he had 9 receptions on 11 targets and 105 yards. Again, as recently as week 13 last season. So he's showing that he still maybe has it. And let's just go back a little bit. Let's talk about his prime when he was going crazy. He was NFL Offensive Player of the Year in 2019. He was 2-time first team All-Pro, both in 2018 and 2019, 3-time Pro Bowler 2017 through 2019, and he was twice the NFL receptions leader with 2018 and 2019, and the NFL receiving yards leader in 2019, again the year that he won Offensive Player of the Year. And shouts out to Heavy.com. You have John Canahan, who did a nice breakdown about him and said, Luke Johnson of NOLA.com said that was the average statistical line in Thomas's 4 seasons with the Saints. 117 catches, 1,378 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Only 17 players in NFL history have hit each of those benchmarks in a single season, unquote. And continuing on with the article from Heavy.com, the historic numbers didn't stop there. He holds the most catches in the NFL season with 149 in that 2019 season when he won Offensive Player of the Year, and he finished with 1,725 yards and 9 touchdowns in that season that he won Offensive Player of the Year. However, since then, Thomas has dealt with multiple injuries, playing in just 20 games from 2020 to the 2023 season. Missed the entire 2021 season, but he has posted just 1,057 yards since 2020 total. But how Thomas can help the Washington Commanders? If the Washington Commanders are looking for a buy low wide receiver, Thomas could be a decent option. The concern is clearly with his health, and he's made comments about his teammates in the past, blaming Derek Carr for getting injured on a bad ball. He will call you out if you're throwing hospital balls. Those Taylor Heineke hospital balls where he was setting Terry McLaurin and those other receivers up to get blasted. Michael Thomas is the type of guy to say something out loud about it, not just to the quarterback, but also to the public to let us know this is why I'm hurt, which I can't even be too mad at and necessarily blame him for. Continuing on with the article, when he's played, he hasn't necessarily played poorly though. He averaged 11.5 yards per reception this past season, 2023, catching 39 passes for 448 yards. That's not bad. While that doesn't make him what he once was, the Commanders' wide receiver room would have been improved if they had him last season, as they had just 4 players with more than 389 receiving yards. He would have been 4th in receiving yards for us. Of course, Terry McLaurin barely made it to reaching 1,000-yard mark with 1,002 yards in that final game of the season. Curtis Samuel had 713, Jahan Dotson at 518 in a down season. I'm expecting him to bounce back, but now we just lost our second leading receiver from last year in Curtis Samuel with the 613 yards that he had. And again, Michael Thomas, in only playing a little bit more than half of the games in the season, had 400 48 yards in the season last year. So he would come in and probably be at worst our wide receiver 4 based off of what we even just saw last year. Even though he's not even in his prime, he's still a pretty decent receiver, and you could argue that he would be an upgrade over some of the people we have further down the depth chart. We're about to dive into that soon too when we take a look at this depth chart. I have a whole graphic for y'all and everything. Continuing with the article real quick though, the Commanders will likely run into growing pains with Jaden Daniels being a rookie quarterback, and the lack of veterans in the wide receiver room could be an issue, but it's uncertain if Thomas can even stay on the field at this point in his career. If it's an incentivized deal, this could be a signing that makes a lot of sense. Thomas was on pace for nearly a 1,000-yard season last year, proving he still has something in the tank when he was healthy. However, the injuries are tough to ignore, and that's a good point. He was on pace for a 1,000-yard season. Again, he only ended up having 448, but if he would have played an entire season, he was on pace to reach 1,000 yards with Terry McLaurin. And again, Curtis Samuel played with almost every game last year. Jahan Dotson played most of the games last year, and they were not on pace to have a 1,000-yard season at all. So again, I'm just trying to prove the point that Michael Thomas probably may not be what he was in his prime, but you can argue that maybe he's better than what we currently have, especially when you're looking at the bottom 3 or 4 guys that will potentially make this 53-man roster. Obviously, Terry McLaurin, Luke McCaffrey, and Jahan Dotson are your top 3 receivers. Michael Thomas wouldn't come in and really take the place of either of those guys. But after that, I mean, as much as I love De'Ami Brown and his blocking, his deep threat ability, I like Jamison Crowder as like a veteran, nuanced slot receiver and a returner as well. Michael Thomas will probably be above those guys on the depth chart immediately, like day one, as long as he's healthy. Now let's move on to Brian Manning of Commanders Wire, because he brings up some solid points as well. In theory, this sounds good. Arguably, no wide receiver in NFL history had a better 4-year start to their career than Michael Thomas. Through his first 4 seasons, Thomas caught 470 passes for 5,512 yards and 32 touchdowns. That was with Drew Brees under center for the Saints. Then the injuries hit. Thomas played in just 7 games in 2020 and missed the entire 2021 season. He played in 3 games in 2022 and then 10 games in 2023. Over the last 4 years, Thomas has 95 receptions, 1,057 receiving yards, and only 4 touchdowns. While Thomas did play in 10 games last season, how exactly would he help the Commanders? How much does he have left? He's 31 years old, great point, and hasn't played a full season in 5 years. That's also a good point. He's dealt with leg injuries, and most receivers who aren't in the starting lineup must be able to contribute on special teams, and that is not Michael Thomas. That is probably the biggest point right there as to why we will more than likely not go get him. Because if you're not one of the top 3 receivers definitively, at best, he would be wide receiver 4. And again, with De'Ami Brown and Jamison Crowder here, that may not even necessarily be an automatic thing. I think he would come in and immediately be wide receiver 4, just based off of the fact that we saw him be relatively productive last year as well, as recently as just the previous season. We're not talking about years ago. Last season, he was still pretty good and better. Again, if we're talking about on pace, if he were healthy, he was on pace to have more yards than Jahan Dotson and Curtis Samuel last year. But at the same time, if you're not a special teamer, De'Ami Brown can play special teams. Jamison Crowder is literally your starting returner right now. So even if Michael Thomas is a slightly better receiver than those guys are right now, they still add a lot more value. First of all, De'Ami Brown is a better blocker than Michael Thomas is, and obviously Jamison Crowder gives you far more special teams value as a returner. Even if you want to play some special teams kickoff coverage, I think Jamison Crowder, even though he doesn't do that, will give you a better chance of being able to contribute there than Michael Thomas ever would. This guy would be taken up as a receiver spot strictly as just a receiver, and that's it. That's all he can provide to you. No versatility at all. Continuing with the article, we can see why Thomas would potentially be linked to the Commanders though, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. Washington will focus on developing McCaffrey as your number 3 wide receiver, with Damiere Byrd, Jamison Crowder, Olamide Zaccheaus battling some of the younger players in camp for multiple roster spots right now. But I do want to point out the fact that Michael Thomas is 6'3", and so he would be our tallest receiver other than 6'4" Bryson Tremaine, who will more than likely not even end up making the final 53-man roster. He's more than likely going to end up on the practice squad unless there's just some unexpected development and rise from his end. But as of right now, Bryson Tremaine being projected to be on the practice squad. No Michael Thomas. Luke McCaffrey is then your tallest receiver out of the entire receiver group as a 6'2" rookie. That's not that great, man. That's not a great situation. So again, the way the positives, he looked pretty good last year. If we're talking about you just scale him and project them onto a fully healthy season, which is a big if, he would have had a better season than even Curtis Samuel and Jahan Dotson had last year. But at the same time, the injuries, the lack of special teams ability, no versatility, he is just pure receiver. And then also you will stifle the development of a lot of the younger guys in hopes of bringing in a guy that, like, this is kind of like the move that you would make if you were ready to win now. If we were Super Bowl contenders right now, we just felt like we were a Michael Thomas away, it would make sense. But why bring in Michael Thomas for a season where we're not expecting us to even make the Super Bowl at all? Maybe not even necessarily the playoffs. I'm expecting a big improvement from last year, only winning 4 games. But how good are we actually? Maybe by the trade deadline, if we look better than what we expected, and okay, wait, maybe we are some playoff or Super Bowl contenders, then maybe you sign him then, maybe later on or something like that. Maybe as we get deeper into the season, maybe even past the trade deadline, if Michael Thomas is still available, maybe then you get him. But I don't think there's any real value to signing him right now in a season that you don't expect to win right now. And then you will be harming the development of all of the younger guys that you're seeing on the screen right now. And Bryson Tremaine, second-year player, Mitchell Tinsley, second-year player, Kazmi Allen, second-year player. I don't have a lot of hope in, like, I don't see Dax Milne having a crazy ceiling, but I think he's like a third or fourth year player. And then Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint is a rookie undrafted free agent. The more snaps and targets and receptions that you give to Michael Thomas in training camp, those are just even more snaps and targets that those guys are not getting to get better. And Michael Thomas will be a very temporary solution. You don't sign Michael Thomas assuming that he'll be with our receiving group for the next 5+ years. You just don't. That's just more of like a 1-year prove it deal type of thing. Maybe if he goes out there and proves himself this year, you sign him to another 1-year prove it deal. But this guy will basically just be arms for hire, a mercenary. You just sign on the 1-year deals and just keep going and going and going until you feel like he's not worth it. But that's even if you start the first signing in the first place. So again, I don't see it happening. I don't think it makes a lot of sense. If we were Super Bowl contenders, then I could see it, because again, there is an argument to be made that he would come in and be your wide receiver 3, maybe even at worst wide receiver 4, you could argue. But we just don't have the time right now. That would just only stifle De'Ami Brown's development as well, and all of the younger guys behind him. Doesn't make much sense right now. Now, moving on to the next topic, then you have Justin Mello of the Draft Network. He did an article on every NFL team's best undrafted free agent. In his article, he said the Washington Commanders agreed to terms with 11 undrafted free agents after the 2024 NFL Draft. Former Georgia wide receiver Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint is among the standouts. Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint possesses the size and athletic profile required to compete for the 53-man roster spot throughout the summer. Rosemy-Jacksaint was a 4-year contributor at Georgia, though he never developed into a focal point of the passing attack. In 2023, he recorded career highs in receptions with 34, receiving yards with 535, yards per catch with 15.7, and touchdowns with 4. The lack of high-end production likely contributed to Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint going undrafted. And then also, just to bring up this point, he was a consistent target for Georgia throughout his time with the program and remained a reliable number to call in clutch moments. He may not be the receiver that's dripping with all of the tools and elite ceiling that many teams are chasing after in the draft process, like elite speed or elite height or just crazy athletic ability. His relative athletic score is actually really low. I think it was like a 2 something, like something dangerously low. But as Georgia learned over the last few years, there's a lot of value in a guy like Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint's game that he can offer on a football field. Is basically being Mr. Consistent for you, Mr. Dependable. Again, in clutch situations, when Georgia really needed a catch, if they targeted him, you could believe that he was going to catch it, and he usually would. And I really appreciate him for that. As a diehard Georgia Bulldog fan, I already miss him. He was never the most explosive receiver on our team. He was never the most exciting, but he was always dependable. And it sucks too, because he was athletic coming out of high school, but he suffered that really bad leg injury. I believe it was against Florida, where he actually had a touchdown. It was like such a bittersweet moment for him. I think it was his first career touchdown in college for the Georgia Bulldogs. And at the same time, he like tore his ACL or some really bad leg injury. And then he was just never the same athlete since then. And that's compromised his athleticism, but he's found ways to contribute outside of that, having great hands, never dropping the ball, always running crisp routes and things like that. He showed out at the Senior Bowl as well. He stuck out a lot at the Senior Bowl, making a lot of great plays there, having touchdowns and things like that. It was really hard to cover him one-on-one there. So I was still fairly surprised that, especially after his Senior Bowl performance that he went undrafted, but at the same time, his athletic profile is strongly lacking. He didn't even run a 40-yard dash to the NFL Combine, leading to questions regarding his long speed, and when you watch on tape, he doesn't have a lot of long speed. And then he reportedly ran a 4.6 at his pro day, and I'm not going to lie, I was surprised he even ran that fast. I mean, he's just not a fast guy. His physical participation in Indianapolis was limited to a 35-inch vertical and a 9'11" broad jump. Both results qualified as historically below average. Again, he's just not a very athletic guy, but when it comes to nuance, like I said, when we first signed him as an undrafted free agent over a month ago, I said he's going to come in and be one of our better wide receivers day one. But with his lack of athleticism, he's not going to come in with a ceiling. He may be better than some of the younger guys that we have on roster right now, but I'm assuming that after some development, with him not having much development to really, not much of like a body to develop into a better receiver, he already has all of the nuanced things. I'm assuming that a lot of those receivers that are not better than him today will eventually become better than him. So we'll see how that works out for him. But continuing with the Draft Network's article, the rocked up 6'1", I mean, he is super swole. I mean, we're talking about discipline, work ethic, getting in the gym, film study, route running, never dropping passes. He's your guy. Like all of the mental stuff, all of the work ethic stuff, all of the off the field stuff, he's every bit of that. 195-pounder is a big body possession receiver who approaches cornerbacks with a physical mindset. He projects as a reliable chain mover at the next level. Some impressive measurements are present with 33-inch arms. That's pretty good. 77 and 3/4 inch wingspan. That's pretty good. And 87th percentile 10-inch hands. So as like a jump ball guy, he's got that. And that's the only part of his like athletic profile that he does have in his favor, how long and his arms are and how big his hands are. Rosemy-Jacksaint was already making plays at rookie minicamp, endearing himself to the quarterbacks in attendance, including number 2 overall pick Jaden Daniels. His big frame allows him to be a climb the ladder receiver when necessary. This highlight from minicamp was particularly eye-popping, and again, if y'all remember, he had that one-handed crazy catch in rookie minicamp that you're seeing on your screen right now. And this caught the eye of everybody, most notably Dan Quinn, because you saw in clips after this, like the practice after this, the next day, Dan Quinn was like spending a lot of time with Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint and patting him on the back and talking to him. I mean, it was like a whole group of players right there at the same time, a lot of different rookie minicamp participants, and Dan Quinn was just so engaged with Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint specifically and nobody else. So, hey man, he's caught the eye of the coaches. That's all you need to do. Splash plays like that are how you get noticed, especially when you're an undrafted free agent. But sadly, he suffered a hamstring injury. It wasn't anything severe, but I don't believe he's practiced since the rookie minicamps. I don't think he's taken part of any of the OTAs or anything like that, but hopefully he'll be back by mandatory minicamps, which start June 11th through the 13th. Or at the very worst case scenario, he'll be back for training camp. We'll see. But going back to the Draft Network's article, Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson are the go-to receivers in Washington's offense. I can see Rosemy-Jacksaint eventually developing into the number 3 or number 4 wideout. See, now the Draft Network is even higher on him than even I am as a Georgia Bulldog fan. He should push De'Ami Brown, Olamide Zaccheaus, and Jamison Crowder for a role. The Commanders drafted just one receiver in 2024 using a 3rd-round compensatory pick on Luke McCaffrey. Special teams may provide Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint with the quickest pathway to prove he deserves to crack the Washington Commanders 53-man roster, and I do want to point that out as well. As a Georgia Bulldog fan, I can attest to that. I can vouch for him. He is a great special teams player as well. He may not necessarily be like the super duper gunner like Terry McLaurin was coming out of Ohio State, but you can ask him to do just about anything on the special teams side of things except for return kicks and or punts, and you know he can go out there and do a great job for you. So that probably is his quickest route to maybe making the 53-man roster, maybe not necessarily as a receiver, but maybe as a special teams guy, or the fact that he provides both. Again, we just talked about how Michael Thomas is only a receiver, that's it, and that's a big problem. Whereas Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, he lacks a lot of athleticism, but he can give you some special teams value and some receiver value as a dependable 3rd and 5. You need somebody to get open and make a catch. That's your guy right there. He's very specific with what he's good at, and I'll take it, man. But continuing with the article, the former Bulldog standout is an experienced special teams player. Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint possesses the profile of a gunner who will try his hardest to be the first player to provide coverage down the field. I'm telling you, he can literally do anything you want him to do on special teams except for return kicks and punts. Continuing with the article, the Commanders pieced together my favorite undrafted class of any team in the NFL. So that's really interesting. This guy thinks that we put together the best undrafted free agent class out of the entire NFL, and he feels like Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint is the most likely out of that group The best in the NFL to crack a 53-man roster. So again, he's very high on Marcus Wosemi-Jacksaint here. The Draft Network is. They're even higher on him than I am. I love Marcus Wosemi-Jacksaint, and I do think that he has like a slight chance of making a 53-man roster. But for us to have the best undrafted free agent class, which I agree with, but then to go on top of that and say Marcus Wosemi-Jacksaint is the standout out of that best class in the entire NFL is very interesting. And then they go on to say this article could have been about a number of them. Again, very high on our entire undrafted class right there. They were aggressive in signing former Michigan State cornerback Chig Anusium to a contract that contained a $300,000 base salary guarantee. Notre Dame quarterback Sam Hartman received a $225,000 base salary guarantee. Yeah, Chiggy making even more than Sam Hartman, and Sam Hartman was making a lot of money for most undrafted free agents. That does show that they really like Chiggy and they really value his talent, and that already just lets me know that they're gonna give him as many opportunities as possible to make the team. That doesn't necessarily have anything to do with what we're talking about in this video, but I just was like, dang, $300,000, even $75,000 more than they give Sam Hartman. Yeah, they're about to give Chiggy every opportunity he can to make this 53-man roster. If he doesn't make the 53-man, that means he just squandered every opportunity that they gave him. But now continuing with the article, other notable undrafted signings that the Washington made were safety Texas Tech Tyler Owens, my favorite undrafted free agent out of the entire class, USC running back Austin Jones, who's literally like an Austin Eckler clone, Virginia Tech defensive tackle Nerl Pollard, little undersized but very productive, and Pittsburgh cornerback AJ Woods. All of them have a chance. And of course, I feel like it's a blend of both. Everybody has a chance because there is a lot of talent in this undrafted free agent class. We do have a lot of elite athletes, especially like a Tyler Owens, who is probably the freakiest athlete out of the entire NFL. I'm not playing with you. A perfect 10 relative athletic score. Jeremy Chin was arguably the most athletic safety in the entire NFL, defensive back in the entire NFL. And then Tyler Owens just came in and outdid him as far as athleticism goes. But on the other side, I also just feel like you just won 4 games last season. Right now, the roster's just kind of up in the air. Everybody has a chance to prove themselves. Just as much of a chance that a guy like Benjamin St. Juste has this corner, Chiggy has the same opportunity as an undrafted free agent. This is entirely new coaching staff, new front office, new everything. So right now, it's really every roster spot is up for grabs, to be completely honest for you right now. So I feel like it's a healthy blend of both. Yeah, it's a very talented undrafted free agent class, but it's also a team that's just looking for answers. And then lastly, finishing up that article, they say Wosemi-Jacksaint possesses a terrific opportunity in front of him. Pairing his untapped potential as a receiver with his special teams profile should allow him to compete for a roster spot during training camp and the preseason. I agree. But with all of this talk about wide receivers, I do want to point out the fact that you can tell that we may have a bigger problem with depth than most people notice. And I also want to point out the fact that if an undrafted free agent wide receiver with a dangerously low relative athletic score has a serious chance to make the 53-man roster, then it does add up. We don't have as much receiver depth as a lot of people kind of assume we do. I love our top guys. Like, I love Terry McLaurin. I love Jahan Dotson. I love Luke McCaffrey. And y'all know, with Marcus Wosemi-Jacksaint being a Georgia Bulldog, I'm probably his biggest fan out of the entire Commanders fan base. So y'all know I'm rooting for him to make the team and develop, and also believe that he has a really nice floor like I talked about earlier. But this is still crazy that a currently injured undrafted free agent wide receiver without elite athletic traits has an honest shot of making your final 53. I love our starting receiving group, but there's a pretty big question mark after that. We have some talent here and there. Again, that Jamison Crowder's ability to be a veteran, nuanced slot receiver, and De'Ami Brown's downfield potential, along with him probably being our best blocking wide receiver. Like, there's reasons why everybody can make this team and actually be able to contribute on Sundays, but it's not like we just have this extremely deep receiving group where it's like there's no way this undrafted free agent that currently has a hamstring injury doesn't make the team right now. So that's kind of a good thing and a bad thing in a way. I mean, really the best way to put it, if there is one injury to our receiving group, especially like the starters, I'm going to say Luka Jahan, because Terry hasn't even missed a game since like forever. And I also want to prove a point. Imagine that Terry is still healthy, but either Luke McCaffrey or Jahan Dotson gets hurt. They have to miss a game or two. I'm not even talking about a serious injury, just banged up or something, questionable, doubtful going into a game. We're going to be looking around like, what's going on out here as far as the receiving group goes immediately? Like, it's going to immediately sound like a team weakness. All we have at the top is Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson. That's it. Those are your two top receivers, and then it's just a group of other guys, again, who can contribute in different ways. But hey, man, maybe I'm just lower in the receiver group than most people are, but it is amazing to me that as much as a Bulldog fan as I am, it's crazy that Marcus Osiemi-Jacksaint even has this honest of a chance of making the team. And then also, the third part of this video that we have to discuss, I know y'all saw that notification about how Miami and wide receiver Jalen Waddle reached an agreement today on a 3-year, $84.75 million contract extension that includes a $76 million guaranteed situation. That is crazy. That's according to per sources. That was Adam Schefter's tweet that said that. And when I first saw that, my initial thought immediately, since we're talking about Commanders and receivers, is that if the Commanders do want to go and get Brandon Aiyuk from the 49ers as a free agent in 2025, then the starting price is at that $28.25 million per year that Jalen Waddle just got, that just made him the 4th highest paid receiver in the NFL annually. That's where you start. But who knows? Maybe he'll take a discount to come play with his best friend in Jaden Daniels, but I doubt it. But you do have to remember, we have to pay Terry McLaurin in the 2026 offseason in 2 years. So that would be a year after we potentially would sign, just for example, for scenario purposes, Brandon Aiyuk to big money in 2025. Then you got to pay Terry McLaurin in 2026. And then if for some reason you don't pick up Jahan Dotson's 5th-year option, you'll have to pay him in 2026 as well. Now, I am projecting them to pick up his 5th-year option, so I'm just going to assume that they do. But then you would have to pay him big money in 2027. So that's still signing 3 receivers to big-time receiver contracts 3 years in a row. Aiyuk in 2025, Terry McLaurin in 2026, and best case scenario, Jahan Dotson in 2027. And I just highly doubt we get ourselves in that situation. But who knows? But I'm just putting it into perspective that right now, our receiving group position right now, our receiving core is looking a little funny. I love the talent in it, but I mean, long term, what are we doing? Are we trying to go get a Brandon Aiyuk? If we do, you got to remember that you got to pay Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson in subsequent years as well. And going back to Michael Thomas, would you sign him right now? I doubt it. Highly doubt they go and get him. I think you wait until like you realize if you're a playoff or a Super Bowl contender that you're just like, okay, now it probably makes sense. And that's only if somebody doesn't step up big time. If Marcus Osiemi-Jacksaint, who we talked about in the middle of the video, or maybe a Jamison Crowder, or De'Ami Brown, or Olamide Zaccheaus, or one of these other random receivers that we have on roster steps up big time. Maybe Bryson Tremaine at 6'4" steps up. Maybe Mitchell Tinsley has shown flashes the last offseason before we got into the regular season, especially like in the joint practices with the Ravens and things like that. Maybe he suddenly figures, maybe something snaps in his head and he's balling out. So even by the time we find out that we are playoff and Super Bowl contenders, maybe we don't even need a Michael Thomas at that point. Who knows? But this receiver group situation is very interesting. I definitely want to get y'all thoughts on that. So yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Do not leave this video without leaving a like. I really appreciate y'all, of course, big time, especially for videos like these. I really want to know y'all opinions in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about the Michael Thomas situation, why you would sign him or why you wouldn't sign him. Also, let me know about Marcus Osiemi-Jacksaint. Do you agree that he has the best shot out of all of our undrafted free agents to potentially make this team? Even as a big-time Georgia Bulldog fan, I may not even necessarily go that far, but I love the sound of it. That's my whole point of giving y'all that article. I love the way that sounds. And then lastly, how do you feel about Brandon Aiyuk's chances of potentially ending up with the Washington Commanders next offseason, now that all of these other receivers are getting big-time money and Brandon Aiyuk is obviously going to demand just as much money as those guys, or if anything, even more? Let me know how you feel about all of these 3 major topics centering around our wide receiver group, and let me know if you have any other thoughts about our wide receiver group that I didn't mention in this video. If you see any potential in any of these guys, like maybe you're a big Damiere Byrd fan or a Davion Davis fan or a Kazmir Allen fan or something like that. Let me know how you feel about this wide receiver group as a whole, all of that. And do you feel like Luke McCaffrey will step up so big that we will not even need a Michael Thomas because he'll be such a great third receiver that we won't even look at him? So let me know how you feel about all of that and more. Really appreciate y'all. Make sure y'all stay tuned for more content on the channel. I have a lot of interesting videos that I'm cooking up like these, where it's a lot of debatable topics and things like that. So stay tuned for all of that. I really appreciate y'all. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.